Pro-life talk. Real world answers. This is Life Report.
Welcome to Life Report. I'm your host, Josh Braun. We're back again with Brad Mattis, the Executive Director of Life Issues Institute. Thanks for being back with us, Brad.
Happy to be here, Josh.
And we are going to ask you the same questions that we put together a questionnaire several years ago that we've asked a lot of pro-life leaders to go through. We've got a couple of questions to start with that are just to get to know you. So, as much as I hate these questions, everyone says they love these questions, so I'm going to ask you anyway. What did you get in trouble for as a child, Brad?
Oh, well, you have to realize I was one of 5 boys. So, I don't know how many hours you have, but I would say one of the most memorable times was when we built a cardboard fort, and my younger brother was in it, and we had this homemade spear, and I tossed it at the fort to see if we could make it stick through the cardboard, and it went right on through and opened a gash above his eye. So, we did a lot of rough and tumble stuff as kids, and sometimes I think, oh my, if my 4 sons would have done that, I would have had a fit.
All right, yeah, I think we've had what, at least 10 people go through this questionnaire, and as a parent, I don't think I've ever heard a scarier story on this show. That's great. Okay, moving on. What is your favorite movie and why, Brad?
Favorite movie? Gosh, it's hard to nail them down, but I would say Top Gun is probably one of the top ones because of my love for our soldiers and our military and what they're doing. So that's always a thrill to watch that program.
What has been the pro-life movement's greatest victory or victories so far?
Well, I would have to say, and I'm perhaps a little biased because I'm in education, but I really think that's one of the things we've done so well, because now recently 3 national polls by top pollsters have indicated that more people identify as pro-life than they do as pro-choice. So I would say we've done that very well. Communicate the reality of abortion to the general public.
What has been the pro-life movement's greatest failing or weakness?
Well, I think one of our biggest weaknesses currently is making sure the next generation understands the basics of abortion. And we're seeing a lot of that evidenced in society today. And I think we're all guilty of that. Those of us here, too, that we just assume people know the basics about fetal development and abortion being legal through all 9 months, and the fact of what abortion does to an unborn child and the parents. So I think that's probably something that we need to work on most. Another thing would be that in the early days when Reagan was in the White House, we were fighting amongst ourselves as to which human life amendment would be the best one.
Yeah.
And the president told his key people that he's not going to get involved in the abortion issue until we get our act together and get unified. So that would have been perhaps one of our biggest downfalls, because who knows what could have happened if we would have had our act together and gotten something through with the president's help.
So let me ask you a follow-up question to that. What do you think about the unity and disunity? A lot of people talk about disunity being one of the biggest weaknesses in the pro-life movement, and then there's some other people that kind of say unity is a little overrated and we all need to be doing different things anyway. How do you feel about pro-life unity, and do we need more of it? And if so, how can we accomplish that?
Well, unity in the movement's been one of the key priorities of Life Issues Institute. We don't have chapters or state organizations. So we are of the opinion to make people aware if somebody's already invented the tool that you want to use it. So we promote in our newsletter, on our website, on radio and TV, things that we think are effective that other people have done. And that has worked very well. A lot of unity has come together in the 22 years the Institute has been here. So it's improved greatly. We also believe in the diversity of the pro-life movement, because Priests for Life can get to people that we can't. Nurses have a credibility with their peers that we wouldn't have. So there's a necessity for all those. And some people say, why can't you just form one pro-life group? Well, I don't think that would be possible, and it might resemble the IRS or bureaucracy of the government, which of course we don't want. So I think there's some goodness in that, but we have to continue to work for unity. I go to Washington D.C. quarterly with other pro-life leaders and meet, and we exchange ideas and information, and we're frequently working together on each other's projects, whether we're telling others about them or taking that on and doing their project through our efforts. We don't have to worry about turf wars because we're all on the same side. And when you promote other stuff, that comes back to you in spades. So don't be afraid of it.
Graphic pictures, should we use them? And if so, how, when, and where?
We absolutely should use them. Actually, Dr. Wilkie was the pioneer of graphic pictures.
Really?
I can't tell you how. Yes, I can't tell you how many times people have said to us that I was pro-choice until I saw those pictures of what abortion does. He and his wife knew early on that after their presentation was over, people weren't going to remember what they said. They will remember the pictures, and that's very true. Now, of course, you need to use discernment with that. I'm not saying that you should use them all the time. It may be detrimental to use them. So use discernment, be careful about when and where you use them, and I think you need to use them in an environment where you can explain and put them in the proper context and make sure that you're not going to have parents upset because their young children see something that they don't want them to see.
So let me just ask you a follow-up to that, because I know some people would argue, I wouldn't argue this, but I know some people would argue that you should put them up in the most public places possible, regardless of where kids will see it, because you can get more numbers, and basically every single person who sees a graphic picture are better for it. And since kids don't seem to be that affected by graphic pictures anyway, let's put them up on freeway overpasses, and let's put them up along streets or outside of abortion clinics. So just give us a little bit more kind of your perspective on this kind of internal pro-life debate.
Well, there's some arguments on both sides, obviously. Personally, I prefer the method of where you can give a little caution. When pictures are put up on university campuses, they put out signs, there's graphic materials ahead, be prepared. As a parent, I think I would have some sympathy for if my kids were very small and saw graphic materials and how that might affect them. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, kids are exposed to a lot of graphic imagery in video games alone. And then these parents let them do that, but then feel they can't see what abortion does. I think perhaps politics may be in the way there. But I think you need to use some discernment and not just force it or push it on people where it may have a negative reaction instead of a positive one.
I 100% agree. That was really, really good. Let me ask you about this. Stem cell research and human cloning. What should pro-lifers be doing about this, and why?
Well, what they need to be doing is telling the world that we won, and the embryonic stem cell people lost big time. They have had no victories or effective treatments with embryonic stem cell research that kills human life for unproven science. And at the same time, there's a myriad of treatments and cures using adult stem cells. Let me just quickly point out two of them. A man recently suffering from a genetic inherited kidney problem had to have a kidney transplant. He saw his mother on anti-rejection medication for 20 years and the effect it had on her body. So not only did he get the donor's kidney, he got the donor's stem cells from the donor's bone marrow. Wow. And it was a tough thing to go through, but he does not have to take any anti-rejection medication during his lifetime because they blended that DNA. And that is really cool. Now, we've also recently read where doctors in Germany have treated a child with cerebral palsy effectively with his own stem cells from the umbilical cord blood that they froze and saved. He was in a coma-like condition, and after a few weeks, he showed improvement. After a few months, he showed significant improvement. He can speak in short sentences, he can feed himself, and he can walk in an assisted fashion. Now, he was considered hopeless. The doctors prepared his parents that he was going to die. And now, who knows how far he'll go. there's lots of research. We did a TV program where they did cornea transplants with stem cells, and it improved their success ratio enormously.
So the pro-embryo stem cell people would respond to you, well, it's not really fair to say that adult stem cell research won and embryonic stem cell research lost, because you guys had all the federal funding, and we, up until recently, didn't have any federal funding, and so you had all this money going to your thing, and you ended up with all these treatments and cures. And adult stem cell research is easier to come up with treatments anyway. And then, poor us, we didn't have all the federal dollars, and we had all these hurdles about the immune system problems and stuff like that. So that just seems really unfair. What would you say to them?
I'd say bunk. They had federal dollars. Obama is pushing federal dollars out the door as fast as he can. In your own state of California, how many billions did they allocate for embryonic stem cell research? And I've recently done a radio program on the fact that they've quietly diverted that funding to adult stem cell research, because that's where the victories are. All you have to look at is, where is the money going? It's shifting over to adult stem cell research, because that's where the success is. They've had their time in the sun. They've failed. There are some huge hurdles they cannot overcome. For instance, it's a foreign tissue to the body that would reject it. It's formed tumors. It's caused all kinds of problems, involuntary movements. It's been disastrous. So it's time to say, we failed, we're sorry, and we agree with you pro-lifers.
Now, just the last month, that from when we're taping this, some scientists in Oregon proclaimed that they had successfully, finally, for the first time, cloned human beings for stem cell research. So what should pro-lifers be doing about human cloning now that it might actually be a reality, and why?
Well, from what I've read, I'm not so sure I believe that yet. I think there's some information out there that indicates that may not actually be the case. If it were, and frankly I doubt it, then we need to let people know of the ethical issues involved with that. And what they're doing is cloning and killing. Beginning human life for cloning purposes, and then killing it and cannibalizing those tiny human embryos for research that seems to be going nowhere.
Okay, so other end of the spectrum, assisted suicide and euthanasia, what should pro-lifers be doing about that, and why?
Well, we need to be talking about the other end of life issues. Euthanasia and assisted suicide, those are a little harder to define and say in sound bites, but we need to make people aware that once you go down that road, you open that Pandora's box, that slippery slope will quickly take you to places you don't want to go. I've been to the Netherlands frequently. As a matter of fact, my Dutch friends were at my house this past weekend, and we often talk about what's happened there where euthanasia was legalized. And in a few decades, they are to the point now where they are euthanizing people with dementia. They are euthanizing infants with Down syndrome. They are advocating euthanasia for virtually any reason. A large number of patients are being euthanized without their knowledge or permission. Women have talked about going to the hospital to see their husband and finding the bed empty, and the doctor says, oh, well, we needed that bed, and he wasn't going to recuperate or recover from that illness. That's the reality of euthanasia and assisted suicide, and we need to do a lot more in education to let people know. There's treatments for depression. There's treatments for pain. As one myself who deals with chronic spine pain every day, there's a lot of good treatment you can get. And I have a lot of empathy for the pain issue since I've lived it for several years. But killing the patient isn't a good solution. I mean, we need to be creative and find ways to help these people.
Let me ask you a follow-up question about the Netherlands. I was in the Netherlands myself about 10 years ago, and I did a discussion with a lot of people in a room about end-of-life issues. And what I noticed, I don't know if you've seen the same thing, is like they were not they were really proud of the fact that they had this. They kind of felt like we are like very forward thinking. We're so ahead of you Americans that we have euthanasia here, and you backwards people don't have it yet. And it was they were very, it wasn't like this kind of unsure thing where, like, in America, there's still an abortion debate. Like, there's still this kind of semi 50-50-ish thing where we're discussing, whereas in the Netherlands, at least the people I talked to just felt like, oh, this is just so obvious. Well, of course we should have this, and it's very safe. No one's euthanized against their will. There's a doctor and 2 nurses and the family, et cetera, signing off on it. And then the research is different when I come back home and look it up. And so have you found that same thing? Like, how is there anything that we could do to help educate the Netherlands, or is this kind of a lost cause?
Well, no, I don't think it's a lost cause. And I've been working with our colleagues there who have an organization called Cry for Life to deal with this. They're not quite so cocky about euthanasia now because they've seen it expand to Brussels. And in Brussels, they found one-way tourism where they go to be killed. And they're dumping bodies everywhere. And people are finding them in the elevators of their apartment buildings because Dignitas has an apartment upstairs where they're getting rid of bodies, and then they're killing people, and then they don't know what to do to dispose of the bodies. And then as far as the abuses that have come up with, they're coming to terms that this isn't all a positive thing. They're also coming to terms with the fact that they've legalized marijuana and drug use. They're also coming to terms with the fact that prostitution is legalized. So I think within time we're going to see the Netherlands come back. That pendulum will swing back to the right more, and we need to look at them carefully to see the pluses and minuses of a society that's liberalized so much and found that it's really not been a good thing.
One of the things I've seen people that are on the kind of pro-assisted suicide stance in America say when I've talked about what we see in the Netherlands, we have really clear evidence of what's happening in the Netherlands. And they'll just say, well, that's them, but we would do it better if we had this in America. Like that's not going to happen here, so you can't just compare, what's going on in their country with our country. How would you respond to that?
Well, then let's just look at the suicide statistics in Oregon, where it's been legalized, and it's increased, I think, 3-4-fold since they made assisted suicide legal.
Yeah, I think so.
People are taking that out when there are other more positive alternatives we can do to help them. So let's not kill the patient. Let's help them and show them some compassion and basic care.
Yeah, let me ask you one more question about this, because I feel like this is a harder issue to discuss than abortion. And I might be wrong, but
no,
I feel
right.
like it's with I've seen a lot of media, a lot of really great TV shows will have some episode about end-of-life issues where they portray this patient who's in horrible pain and there is nothing you can do about it. This is the only kind thing to do for them. And I've seen people say, okay, well, I can agree that euthanasia is problematic. We don't want other people doing this. But if the person asks, if it really is a real, like they're just wanting to end their life, that doesn't seem as problematic as like an active euthanasia. So what are the best things to say to someone who's kind of in that category?
Well, I think we have to show in history, wherever euthanasia has been legalized or permitted to some level, there's been a gradual and fairly quick decline, a steep decline, where so-called safeguards were not effective. And I think we can look at places where it is legalized, Switzerland, Brussels, Netherlands, and look at states like Oregon, and realize, no, it's not the panacea everybody thinks it is. There's a lot of good that comes out of the dying process. A good friend of mine 2 years ago was headed for divorce. It was all but finalized. And then her husband found out he had terminal cancer. And he went within about 8 weeks of being diagnosed. But during that time, they healed their marriage. He healed his relationship with his 9 kids. He died peacefully at home with all of the family around him. And now everybody has warm, loving memories of their father and husband. That would have never happened had we had euthanasia legal and taken him off to the clinic for his lethal injection. And Dr. Wilkie has always been a good advocate of that so much happens when you have that process. You can heal relationships. We can benefit by taking care of somebody who's dying. I did that very early in life as a teenager, and that changed me to the good, I would say, because of the fact of showing compassion and help for people in the most basic needs of the day.
Okay, I'm going to ask you about a really common theme on our show. How should pro-life advocates interact with those that are pro-abortion choice?
Be nice, play nice, get along with others. Some of my friends who are liberals, we get along very well, and then when they find out that not only am I pro-life, but I've dedicated my life to ending abortion, they're absolutely dumbfounded, and they say, well, you're not crazy. You don't foam at the mouth. You don't throw the Bible at me. You seem to be very, very sane. And I said, well, yes, most of us are that way. You just hear about the bad ones. We need to have a friendship with people before they'll listen to us. And if it's only a momentary interaction, open the door with good human abilities of interacting. Communicate well, be nice, basically, and loving about your point of view. Share your point of view without getting angry or upset. The best way we found at the Institute to convince people to change hearts on abortion is in a calm, rational manner. Share the facts as we have them. And even if they get emotional and upset, we need to stay calm, be loving and kind, and we'll be effective that way.
Now, I think that there are some pro-life people, definitely not me, but I've seen them on Facebook and YouTube that would say, if you're saying that we should not be angry or get angry, then clearly you're not taking abortion as seriously as I am, because this is baby killing. We should be angry. We should be shouting about this, and then maybe we'll get more attention and it'll make a bigger impact with people. What would you say to them?
Well, it is because the issue is so urgent that each day over 3,000 babies die. Every 21 seconds, another heart is stopped by abortion. I share that urgency. I share that anger, that frustration. But it is so critically important that we turn this around. We don't have the luxury of voicing and interacting in angry ways because we're not doing any good. We're hurting the cause. So we have to be intelligent about this, be discerning, and find out the best way to communicate. If somebody comes to you and says prostitution should be legal, and they do this in such an angry, violent way, do you think you're going to be persuaded?
No.
Absolutely not. So put yourself in their shoes and think of how you'd want to be approached on an issue that they're trying to convince you about, that you have very strong feelings about.
Okay, what single thing should pro-life people be doing that most are not doing right now?
Working within their sphere of influence. We all have that sphere, whether it be family members, people we go to church with, people in our office, our neighbors. You'd be surprised if you just think about your sphere of influence and people that you come into contact with every month. Set a goal of speaking to 5 people each month about the abortion issue, educating them, and then learn by the process and learn, well, it's more effective to say it this way or to bring that up as a discussion starter. But look around you and see what you can do in your own little world. If we all did that, we would have a huge impact on the abortion issue.
Now, we have a rule on Life Report, DBW, don't be weird. How can pro-life people have these conversations about such an emotional and kind of dark issue with the people in their sphere of influence without being weird? How can they get those conversations started?
Well, talk about current events. Recently in Cleveland, young girls were liberated after being held captive for 10 years. And they were impregnated repeatedly and forced to have abortions. Bring up current issues like that and then gently bring in the discussion. And do you think that he should be up on murder charges for killing those unborn babies against the will of the women? Do you think that's right? Because he may be the first person to be put on death row for killing an unborn child. I say put it in the context of what's relevant to them and to us and take it from there.
Right. Let me ask you one more question about this. How should pro-life people use Facebook? Obviously, people like you and me are going to be putting a lot of things out on Facebook because we're trying to get information out to people. We're educators in the end. But people that are not full-time in this work but are very passionate about this issue, I've seen kind of the entire spectrum. Some people will only post things every once in a while about the abortion issue, but then mostly they're posting kind of what usually people use Facebook for. And there's some people that like every hour they have a new image or a meme or even a graphic picture that they're putting up or a story, and like this is kind of all that they are on Facebook. Do you have any thoughts about how pro-lifers could most effectively reach their sphere of influence, their Facebook friends on this issue?
Well, I would be discerning about what I put out there. And if you just hit them over the head with it repeatedly and not let them up for air, I think they're going to tend to just zone out everything you're talking about. So try to put yourself in the shoes of somebody who would be receiving that information, or think of another issue of somebody communicating with you on where they just constantly lives and breathes that issue and never brings up anything else. I just don't think that's an effective way to go. But there is a lot you could be sharing, and you can do it frequently without being overbearing, I think.
Before we go, give a plug for Life Issues. If people went to lifeissues.org, what are some of the resources that they could find there?
Oh, we've got a wealth of information at lifeissues.org, anywhere from cloning to fetal development, to men in abortion, helping women after abortion, euthanasia, our urban outreach department, everything. It's just a library of information, and we link to other groups that are providing essential information also. So if we don't have it, we'll know where to get it. So let us know if you can't find it on our website.
That's it for this episode of Life Report. Brad Mattis is the Executive Director of Life Issues Institute. Once again, check out their website. Check out their amazing TV show at lifeissues.org. Thanks so much for being here with us. You've been a wealth of information, Brad.
Well, thanks, Josh. I enjoyed it.
If you'd like to comment on this episode, you can go to prolifepodcast.net/176. Scroll down through the show notes. You can leave us a comment or a question. We'd love to interact with you. And remember, you can have an impact on any conversation if you ask good questions, listen to understand, and find genuine common ground when possible. Have a great week. Now go talk to someone.
You've been watching Life Report, Pro-Life Talk, Real World Answers. Life Report is produced by Right to Life of Central California. Visit their website at fresnoprolife.org.